The stranger rode into Delta, Colorado on a morning so cold that the breath from his horse looked like cannon smoke in the September air of 1876, and Xavier Thornton knew. From the moment he saw the woman in gray riding behind the supply wagon that his carefully ordered life was about to change forever. She sat perched on the back of Bill Henderson's freight wagon, spine straight as a rifle barrel, wearing gloves despite the dust and heat that would come later in the day. Xavier had been ranching in these parts for 5 years now, building his spread from nothing into something that could support a small crew. He needed help at the main house, someone who could cook and manage the domestic side of things while he and his men worked the cattle. The advertisement he had placed in the Denver newspaper had been specific. Woman of good character needed for housekeeping position on working ranch, room and board provided, wages fair. When Bill's wagon creaked to a stop outside the general store, Xavier approached with his hat in his hands, trying to look respectable despite the trail dust on his clothes. The woman turned to look at him, and he found himself staring into eyes the color of storm clouds over the Rockies. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her face was pale, as if she spent most of her time indoors. "Miss Amelia Grayson," she said before he could introduce himself. "You must be Mr. Thornton. Your advertisement said to meet you in Delta at the general store on the 15th. "Yes, madam, that's right." Xavier helped her down from the wagon, noting that she carried only one small trunk and a carpet bag. She wore those gloves, gray like her dress, buttoned at the wrist. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from here. I have a horse for you, gentle mare, if you can ride." "I can manage," Amelia said, her voice steady but quiet. Bill Henderson tipped his hat. "Found her at the stage station in Montrose yesterday. Quiet traveling companion, but pleasant enough." Xavier loaded her trunk onto his pack horse while Amelia stood waiting, hands clasped in front of her. Those gloves seemed well worn but cared for, the leather supple from use. He wondered about them but did not ask. A person's past was their own business out here, and plenty of folks came west to leave something behind. The ride to the ranch took them through rolling grassland dotted with sage and the occasional stand of cottonwoods near the creek beds. Xavier pointed out landmarks as they rode, trying to make conversation. Amelia responded politely but offered little about herself. She rode competently, keeping the mare at a steady pace beside his gelding. "The work is not easy," Xavier said as they crossed onto his land, marked by a wooden gate with a simple T brand burned into the crossbeam. "Cooking for 5 men, keeping the house clean, laundry, mending. I pay $30 a month plus your room. Sundays are your own after breakfast is cleared." "That is more than fair," Amelia replied. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Thornton." "Xavier, please. We do not stand much on formality out here." She did not offer him the same familiarity in return. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low rise. It was a solid structure of logs and stone, 2 stories, with a wide porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. The bunkhouse sat 50 yards away, and beyond that were the barn, corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape in every direction, grazing on the last of the summer grass. "It is bigger than I expected," Amelia said, and Xavier thought he heard a note of relief in her voice. "Built it myself, with help from the men. Had to make it sturdy for the winters up here." He dismounted and helped her down, though she moved to do it herself. His hands at her waist were brief, professional, but he noticed how thin she was under the heavy dress. The house was clean but clearly lacking a woman's touch. Xavier lived simply, with functional furniture and bare walls. He showed Amelia to her room on the 2nd floor, a decent-sized space with a window overlooking the creek and mountains beyond. The previous housekeeper left 2 months ago to get married, Xavier explained, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. I have been making do with whatever the men and I can manage, which is not much beyond beans and bad coffee. I will have supper ready by 6 if that suits you, Amelia said, already unpinning her hat. She did not remove the gloves. That would be fine. I will introduce you to the crew then. Xavier hesitated at the door. Miss Grayson, if you need anything at all, you just ask. I want you to feel safe here. She met his eyes then, and he saw something there he could not quite name. Fear, maybe, or wariness. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. That means more than you might know. By 6 o'clock, the smell of frying meat and fresh biscuits drew the ranch hands to the house like flies to honey. Xavier had washed up and put on a clean shirt, wanting to make a good impression on Amelia's behalf. The 4 men who worked for him were good sorts, if rough around the edges. Tom Patterson was the oldest at 40, a weathered Texan who had been with Xavier from the start. Brothers Jake and Samuel Morrison were both in their 20s, hardworking and honest. The youngest was Rory Chen, the son of a Chinese railroad worker and a Ute woman, just 19 but one of the best horsemen Xavier had ever seen. They filed into the dining room with their hats off, eyes widening at the spread Amelia had laid out. Fried steaks, biscuits, gravy, green beans she must have found in the root cellar, and even an apple pie cooling on the sideboard. Gentlemen, this is Miss Amelia Grayson, our new housekeeper, Xavier said. I expect you all to treat her with the utmost respect. Amelia stood beside the table, still wearing her gloves despite the heat from the kitchen. The men murmured their greetings, shuffling their feet. Please sit and eat while it is hot, she said. I will serve. You will sit and eat with us, Xavier corrected gently. We are not fancy here, Miss Grayson. Everyone eats together. She looked startled but took the seat he pulled out for her. As they ate, the men complimented her cooking effusively, and a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. She ate little herself, Xavier noticed, and she managed her fork and knife with those gloves on, never once suggesting she might remove them. After supper, the men returned to the bunkhouse while Xavier helped Amelia clear the table. She tried to shoo him away, but he insisted. I am not some grand gentleman who cannot wash a dish, he said, pumping water into the basin. Besides, it gives us a chance to discuss the routine. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Xavier washing while Amelia dried and put away. He found himself studying her profile in the lamplight, the elegant line of her jaw, the shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. May I ask you something, Miss Grayson? He ventured. She stiffened slightly. You may ask. Why Delta? It is a long way from Denver, and there must have been positions closer to the city. Amelia was quiet for a long moment, her gloved hands still on the plate she was drying. I needed distance, she finally said. From my past life, Delta seemed far enough. Xavier nodded, understanding that need in his bones. We have that in common then. I came here to build something new, something my own, left a lot behind in Kansas to do it. Do you regret it? Not for a single day. He handed her the last plate. I hope you will come to feel the same about this place. Over the next few weeks, Amelia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, kept the house spotless, and produced meals that had the men looking forward to every sitting. She was quiet but not unfriendly, listening to their stories at dinner with genuine interest, even if she shared little of her own. Xavier found himself making excuses to come back to the house during the day. He would need a canteen refilled, or he would remember some tool in the workshop beside the porch. Each time, he would find Amelia at some task, always efficient, always wearing those gloves. He saw them when she kneaded bread, the leather dark with flour. When she hung laundry, pinning sheets to the line with gloved fingers. When she mended his shirts in the evening, her needle flashing in the lamplight, guided by hands he had never seen bare. It was Tom who first mentioned it to Xavier, about a month after Amelia's arrival. They were checking fence lines on the northern section of the property, and the old cowboy spat tobacco juice before speaking. "That Miss Grayson is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, as my dear mother would have said." "How do you mean?" Xavier asked, though he knew exactly what Tom was getting at. "The gloves, boss. She wears them every minute of every day. Even saw her coming from the privy at dawn once and she had them on. Makes a man wonder what she is hiding." Xavier felt a surge of protectiveness. "A woman is entitled to her privacy, Tom. Whatever her reasons, they are her own." Sure, Tom agreed. "Just seems like maybe something happened to her, something bad. She has the look of someone running from trouble." That night, Xavier lay awake thinking about Tom's words. He had noticed things himself, small tells that suggested a difficult past. The way Amelia flinched at sudden movements. How she always positioned herself with her back to a wall when possible. The nightmares that sometimes woke her, muffled cries from her room that made him ache to comfort her, but made him stay respectfully in his own bed. He was falling in love with her. The realization hit him like a bucking horse, undeniable and terrifying. It was not just her beauty, though she was lovely in a quiet way that grew on him more each day. It was her strength, her dignity, the gentle kindness she showed to everyone despite whatever pain she carried. The way she laughed at Jake's terrible jokes, how she always saved the best portions for Rory, because she had noticed he was still growing. The careful way she mended things as if every object deserved respect and care. Xavier was 32 years old, and he had built this ranch with the dream that someday he might have a family to share it with. He had never met a woman who made him think seriously about that future until now. But Amelia kept herself at a distance, polite but reserved. She called him Mr. Thornton, despite his requests otherwise. She never joined them on the porch in the evenings when they would sit and watch the sunset. She was there but not there, present but protected behind invisible walls. October brought the first snow, light dustings that melted by afternoon. Xavier and his crew began the work of moving cattle to lower pastures, long days in the saddle that left them exhausted by nightfall. Amelia started leaving coffee on the stove for them, no matter how late they came in, and sandwiches wrapped in cloth. One evening, Xavier returned to find the house dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen. Amelia sat at the table, her account book open in front of her, tallying the household expenses. She looked up when he entered, startled. "I did not hear you come in. Sorry, did not mean to frighten you." Xavier poured himself coffee, noting that his hand was shaking slightly from fatigue. They had lost a calf to a mountain lion today, and his shoulder ached from hours of digging fence posts. "You should not wait up, we can fend for ourselves." "It is my job," she said simply. "Even jobs have limits." He sat down across from her, suddenly bold in his exhaustion. "Miss Grayson, may I speak plainly with you?" She closed the account book slowly. "Of course. You have been here 2 months now, and you work harder than any person I have ever known. You have made this house a home, made the men happier, made everything run smoother. But you barely eat, you never rest, and you hold yourself apart from us like you are just passing through." He took a breath. "I know it is not my business, but I find myself caring about what troubles you. And I wanted you to know that if you ever need help, if something from your past is chasing you, I would do everything in my power to protect you." Amelia's eyes had gone wide, and in the lamplight he saw them glisten with unshed tears. "Why would you do that? You hardly know me." "Because you matter," Xavier said. Because in 2 months, you have become important to me, to all of us here. Because whatever you are running from, you do not deserve to keep running alone." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment he thought she would flee to her room, but instead she turned to the window, looking out at the darkness. "I was married," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "In Philadelphia. Edward Garrison was his name, from a good family. Everyone thought I was so fortunate to catch his attention." Xavier waited, sensing there was more, that this was a dam breaking after years of holding back. He was charming in public. In private, he was a monster. Her voice remained steady, but her shoulders were rigid. "The gloves hide the scars, Mr. Thornton. Burns, mostly, from when he would hold my hands to the stove when he felt I had displeased him. Other marks, too, from when he would crush my fingers indoors or step on them with his boots. The doctors said I was clumsy, prone to accidents. Edward was always so concerned, so caring when others were watching. Rage such as Xavier had never known flooded through him, but he kept his voice calm. Where is he now? Dead." She turned to face him, and her expression was fierce. "I did not kill him, though God knows I wanted to. He fell down the stairs in a drunken rage, broke his neck. I waited until after the funeral, until his family had gone through his will and found he left me nothing. And then I took what money I had saved in secret and ran. I changed my name, traveled west, and I have been looking over my shoulder ever since, afraid his family would come after me for leaving, for somehow causing his death by being an inadequate wife." Xavier stood slowly, keeping his movements careful and measured. "You are safe here, Amelia. No one is going to hurt you again. I swear that to you on everything I hold sacred. You cannot promise that. I can, and I do." He took a step closer but did not reach for her. "This ranch is yours as much as it is mine. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be. And if anyone comes looking for you, they will have to go through me and 4 loyal men who would ride into hell for the woman who makes their favorite apple pie." A sob escaped her then, followed by another, and suddenly she was crying in earnest. Xavier closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she wept against his chest. She felt small and fragile, but he knew better. This woman had survived horrors and kept going, had rebuilt her life from nothing. She was steel wrapped in silk. When the storm passed, Amelia pulled back, wiping her eyes with her gloved hands. "I am sorry. That was inappropriate. Crying when you need to is never inappropriate." Xavier retrieved his handkerchief and handed it to her. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." "I have never told anyone before," she admitted. "It felt like if I said it out loud, it would make it more real somehow, but keeping it inside was eating me alive." They talked until the lamp burned low, Xavier refilling their coffee cups while Amelia shared more details of her escape, her journey west, the constant fear that had been her companion for months. He told her about his own past, a father who drank away the family farm in Kansas, a mother who died when Xavier was 15. His decision to head west and make his own way rather than watch everything crumble. "We are both running from ghosts," he said as the first light of dawn began to gray the windows. "Maybe it is time we stopped running and started building something better." "I would like that," Amelia said softly. "I would like that very much." The next weeks brought a subtle shift in the household. Amelia smiled more often, joined them on the porch some evenings, and even removed her gloves once while kneading bread when she thought no one was looking. Xavier had come in for water and caught a glimpse of her hands before she quickly pulled the gloves back on. But not before he saw the puckered scars, the discolored skin, the crooked set of one finger that had healed badly. His heart had clenched at the sight. not from revulsion but from grief for what she had endured. He said nothing, just filled his canteen and left, but that night he lay awake thinking about how much courage it took for her to be here, to cook and clean and live her life with hands that must cause her pain and reminded her daily of her suffering. He courted her slowly, carefully. Small gestures that could be dismissed as friendly if she was not ready for more. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, claiming they were just blooming and he thought she might like them for the table. He fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked. When he went into Delta for supplies, he brought back ribbon that matched her eyes, saying the storekeeper had recommended it. Amelia began courting him back in her own way. His favorite foods appeared more frequently at dinner. His shirts were mended with particular care, decorated with tiny, nearly invisible stitches that showed her skill. She asked about his day and listened with genuine interest to his plans for the ranch. November brought harder cold and preparations for winter. Xavier and the crew spent long days ensuring everything was secured, feed stored, equipment maintained. Amelia preserved vegetables, made sure the root cellar was stocked, and began the enormous task of making enough warm clothes and blankets to see everyone through until spring. One afternoon, Xavier came in from the barn to find her struggling with a bolt of heavy wool fabric. He took one end without asking, and they spread it across the dining table together. "Winter coats for the men," she explained. "I measured their old ones while doing laundry. Rory needs 2 sizes larger than what he has. That boy keeps growing. You are making coats for all of them. It is getting cold and I have the skill. It would be foolish not to use it." She began pinning the pattern to the fabric with her gloved hands moving with practiced precision. Xavier watched her work, marveling at her capability. "You are an extraordinary woman, Amelia Grayson." She looked up, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I am only doing what needs to be done." "No," he said, moving around the table to stand beside her. "You are doing far more than that. You are taking care of people, making their lives better. You do it because you have a good heart, not because it is required." Amelia set down the scissors she had been holding. "Xavier, I need to tell you something." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it from her lips made his pulse quicken. "When I came here, I thought I would work for a year, save my wages, and then move on to somewhere even more remote. I thought if I kept moving, kept hiding, I might somehow outrun my past. But being here, with you, with everyone, I have realized that running forever is not living. It is just a slower kind of dying." She took a shaky breath. "I do not want to run anymore. I want to stay. If you will have me, I want to make this my home, truly." "There is nothing I want more," Xavier said, his voice rough with emotion. "Amelia, I have to be honest with you. My feelings have grown beyond those of an employer. I have come to care for you deeply, to admire you, to want your happiness above almost anything else. If you need time, if you are not ready for anything beyond friendship, I understand. But I needed you to know where my heart stands." She looked up at him, her gray eyes searching his face. "I care for you too. It frightens me how much I care. Edward made me believe that I was unworthy of kindness, that love was just another word for control and pain. You have shown me something different. The way you treat your men, your animals, your land, with respect and care, it has shown me what a good man looks like. But Xavier, my hands, my scars, they will never heal. I will never be whole." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her gloved hands in his. "You are whole, Amelia. Scars do not make you less. They make you who you are, a survivor, a woman of strength and courage. I do not need you to be anything other than exactly what you are. I have not even shown you properly," she whispered. "You have only seen glimpses. Then show me now if you trust me enough, but only if you are ready. For a long moment, Amelia stood frozen, and Xavier thought she would refuse. Then, slowly, she began to unbutton the right glove. Her fingers trembled as she peeled back the soft leather, revealing the hand beneath. The scars were worse than he had imagined from his brief glimpse. Burns covered her palm and fingers, shiny patches of damaged skin interspersed with normal flesh. 2 fingers had clearly been broken and set improperly, leaving them slightly crooked. Her knuckles were knotted, probably from being struck repeatedly. She showed him the left hand next, equally damaged, and stood before him with her hands bare for the first time in his presence, her breathing quick and shallow as if she might bolt at any moment. Xavier raised her right hand to his lips and kissed it gently, then did the same with her left. "Beautiful," he said. "You are so beautiful, Amelia, every part of you." A tear slid down her cheek. "How can you say that?" "Because I see all of you, not just the scars. I see hands that create wonderful meals, that mend torn fabric, that care for others with tenderness. I see strength and survival. I see the woman I love." The words hung in the air between them. Amelia's breath caught, and then she was in his arms, her bare hands clutching his shirt, her face pressed against his chest. "I love you too," she said, muffled against him. "I did not think I could ever feel this way again, but I do. I love you, Xavier Thornton." He tilted her chin up and kissed her, gentle and reverent, pouring everything he felt into that contact. Amelia kissed him back with a hunger that spoke of months of loneliness and longing, of finding something precious when she had stopped believing it existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Amelia. Not because it is proper or expected, but because I want to spend every day of my life with you, because I want to build a future together here on this land. Because when I think about growing old, I want it to be beside you." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed 3 weeks later in Delta's small church, with Tom, Jake, Samuel, and Rory as witnesses. Amelia wore a simple dress of blue wool that she had sewn herself, and for the ceremony, she left her gloves off. When Xavier slipped the ring onto her scarred finger, his hands were steady and sure. The minister was a circuit preacher named Reverend Walsh, who came through Delta once a month. He was an elderly man with kind eyes who asked no difficult questions about Amelia's past, or why she had no family present. "Do you, Xavier Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Xavier said, his eyes never leaving Amelia's face. "And do you, Amelia Grayson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Amelia said, her voice clear and strong. When they kissed as husband and wife, the small gathering cheered. Amelia laughed, a sound of pure joy that Xavier had never heard from her before, and he vowed silently to give her reason to laugh like that every day for the rest of their lives. They held a celebration dinner at the ranch, with Amelia cooking one last time as a gesture of love for the men who had become her friends and family. She had made a feast: roasted chickens, potatoes with gravy, fresh bread, 3 kinds of pie, and a cake with white frosting that Jake declared the finest thing he had ever eaten. As the sun set and the men retired to the bunkhouse with full bellies and happy hearts, Xavier led Amelia upstairs to the room that was now theirs together. He had spent the previous day moving his belongings into her space, which had better light and the view she loved of the mountains. Amelia stood by the window, looking out at the darkening landscape, and Xavier came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning back against him. "I keep thinking I will wake up and find this is all a dream." "It is real," he said, kissing the side of her neck. "You are my wife, this is your home, and tomorrow we wake up and start building our life together." That night, Xavier was patient and gentle, learning what made Amelia sigh with pleasure, what made her tense with old fear. They moved slowly, communicating with touches and whispers, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, Amelia cried again, but this time from happiness and relief and the overwhelming feeling of being safe in someone's arms. Afterward, she traced the muscles of his chest with her scarred fingers, no longer hiding. "I never thought anyone would want me like this. Edward made me believe I was damaged beyond repair." "You were never damaged," Xavier said fiercely. "He was the broken one, the twisted one. You survived him, Amelia. You are here, alive and strong, and you are mine now. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how precious you are." Winter settled over the ranch with snow and cold winds. Xavier and Amelia fell into the rhythms of married life, learning each other's habits and preferences. She discovered that he liked to read before bed, histories and adventure stories that took him far from the ranch. He learned that she sang softly while cooking, old songs from her childhood in a voice like honey. The men treated Amelia with even more respect now that she was the boss's wife, but the fundamental relationships remained unchanged. She still cooked and managed the house, though Xavier helped far more than he had before, and she took on the ranch bookkeeping, her neat figures and careful accounting revealing that she had a head for numbers. On Christmas morning, Xavier gave her a gift that made her weep. It was a pair of gloves, supple leather dyed a rich burgundy, lined with rabbit fur for warmth. They were beautiful and functional, and they fit perfectly. "I know you do not need to hide anymore," he said. "But I thought you might like to have nice gloves, ones you choose to wear because you want to, not because you have to." "They are perfect," Amelia said, slipping them on. "Thank you, my love." She gave him a heavy wool scarf she had knitted, dyed with indigo she had traded for in town, and a book of poetry she had mail-ordered from Denver because he had mentioned once that his mother used to read poems to him. The new year of 1877 brought a January thaw, and with it, unexpected visitors. Xavier was in the barn when Tom came running, his face tight with concern. "Boss, we have got riders coming up from the south. 3 of them, and they do not look friendly." Xavier grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, his heart hammering. Amelia was in the house alone, the other men scattered across the property doing various tasks. The riders approached slowly, and as they got closer, Xavier saw they were well-dressed city men, out of place in their fine coats and polished boots. The leader was middle-aged with graying temples and a hard mouth. They stopped 30 yards from the house. "I am looking for a woman," the man called out. "Late 20s, dark hair, might be going by a false name. We have reason to believe she came through these parts." Xavier's hands tightened on the rifle. "Who is asking?" Charles Garrison. "I am looking for my late brother's widow. She ran off after his death, and the family has concerns about her mental state. We only want to ensure she is receiving proper care." From the house, Xavier heard a door close quietly. Amelia had heard. He prayed she would stay inside. "This is private property," Xavier said evenly, "and I have not seen anyone matching that description. I suggest you move along." "Now, I did not come all this way to be turned aside by a cowboy," Charles said, his tone turning ugly. "That woman stole from my family. She disappeared with jewelry and money that belonged to my brother's estate. She is a thief and probably worse." "That is a lie," Xavier said. "And you are going to leave my land right now, or I am going to make you leave." Tom had appeared from the barn, rifle in hand. Jake and Samuel were running from the corral, and Rory rode in from the pasture, all of them armed and looking ready for trouble. Charles Garrison looked at the assembled men and seemed to reconsider his approach. "Look, we can settle this in a civilized manner. If you know where Amelia is, just tell her to return what she took, and we will forget this whole thing." "She did not take anything that was not rightfully hers," Xavier said. "And even if she had, a man who would burn his wife's hands has no rights worth respecting." Charles's eyes narrowed. "So she is here. I want to see her. Now." The front door of the house opened and Amelia stepped out onto the porch. She had put on the new gloves Xavier had given her for Christmas, and she stood straight-backed and proud. "Hello, Charles," she said. "I did not think you would come all this way just for me. Amelia." Charles's smile was oily. "You have led us on quite a chase. It is time to come home and face what you have done." "I have done nothing except survive your brother's cruelty," Amelia said, her voice steady. "I took nothing from him but the scars he gave me and the nightmares that still wake me some nights. There is no jewelry, no money. Edward spent everything he had on liquor and gambling. You know that as well as I do. That is a serious accusation against a dead man. It is the truth. And I am not going anywhere with you, Charles. This is my home now. I am married, I have a life here, and you have no claim on me." Charles's facade cracked, showing the ugliness beneath. "You think some frontier marriage protects you. I can have it annulled. I can make your life hell, you stupid girl. You belong to my brother, and now you belong to the family. You will do as you are told." Xavier had heard enough. He raised the rifle, not quite pointing it at Charles, but making his intent clear. "The lady has spoken. She is not leaving, and you are. Right now." The two men with Charles shifted nervously in their saddles, clearly hired muscle who had not signed on for a gunfight. Charles stared at Xavier with naked hatred. "You have no idea what you are getting into protecting her. The Garrison family has reach. We have money and influence. I can destroy you." "You can try," Xavier said. "But this is Colorado, not Philadelphia. Your money and name mean nothing here. All that matters is what a man does and how he treats people. By that measure, you and your whole rotten family are worth less than dirt. Now get off my land before I put you off." For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Then Charles wheeled his horse around, his companions following. "This is not over," he called back. "Yes, it is," Amelia said quietly. "It has been over since the day Edward died. I am sorry I did not understand that sooner." They watched the riders disappear down the trail, and only when they were out of sight did Amelia's composure break. She swayed on the porch, and Xavier dropped the rifle and rushed to catch her before she fell. "I have got you," he said. "I've got you, love. You are safe." "He found me," Amelia whispered. "After everything, he still found me. And he saw that you have people who will stand with you. He saw that you are not alone and powerless anymore." Xavier held her close, feeling her trembling. "He will not come back, Amelia. Men like that are cowards. They only fight when they know they will win." Tom approached the porch. "Want me to ride into town, alert the sheriff that we might have trouble?" "Yes, do that," Xavier said. "Tell Sheriff Morrison what happened, describe those men. Let us make sure there is a record in case they try anything else." Over the next weeks, they waited for retaliation that never came. Tom reported that Sheriff Morrison had sent a telegram to authorities in Denver, making inquiries about the Garrison family. It turned out Charles's reach was not as long as he claimed. The family had money once, but Edward had indeed gambled and drunk most of it away. Charles was trying to hold onto the dregs of a fading legacy, and pursuing a runaway widow across the country was more than he could afford, especially when faced with armed resistance. The sheriff sent word that if the Garrisons attempted any legal action, he would be happy to take statements about Edward's abuse. Several doctors in Philadelphia, it seemed, had quietly noted their suspicions about Amelia's injuries over the years. No one had helped her while Edward lived, but they were willing to speak up now to prevent his family from harassing her further. Amelia read the sheriff's letter with tears streaming down her face. "They knew," she said. "All those doctors, they knew what he was doing and no one stopped him." "I know," Xavier said, holding her. "I know, and it is not right and it is not fair, but it is over now, truly over. You are free, Amelia." She looked up at him, her gray eyes clear. "I am free," she repeated as if testing the words. "I am really free." Spring came to the ranch with wildflowers and new calves. Amelia began to go outside without her gloves sometimes, letting the sun warm her scarred hands. She was still self-conscious, but she no longer hid constantly. She and Xavier worked together to plant a vegetable garden behind the house, turning the soil and planning what would grow best. They talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about maybe adding dairy cows so Amelia could make butter and cheese. "I would like to have children someday," Amelia said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I always wanted to be a mother, but with Edward, I was terrified of bringing a child into that house." "I would like that too," Xavier said, taking her hand. "When you are ready, not before." She smiled at him, that beautiful smile that lit up her whole face. "I think I am ready now, ready to live fully, to build a future without fear." That summer, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Xavier on a warm July evening, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said. "In February, the doctor thinks." Xavier swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got dizzy. His joy was incandescent, infectious, and that night they celebrated with the whole ranch, Amelia allowing herself a small glass of wine while the men toasted to the future Thornton heir. The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia was sick for months, barely able to keep food down, and Xavier worried constantly. He hired a woman from town, Mrs. Chen, who was Rory's aunt, to help with the heavy housework, insisting that Amelia rest as much as possible. "I am not made of glass," Amelia protested, but she was secretly grateful for the help and for Xavier's attentiveness. As her belly grew, Xavier would spend evenings talking to their unborn child, telling stories about the ranch, about the mountains and meadows where their baby would grow up. He would rest his head against Amelia's stomach, marveling at the kicks and movements. "Strong," he would say. "This baby is going to be strong like their mother." In February of 1878, on a snowy night with the wind howling outside, Amelia went into labor. Mrs. Chen and the doctor from town, a competent woman named Dr. Sarah Bell, attended her while Xavier paced the floor downstairs, driven nearly mad with worry by every cry of pain from above. Tom sat with him, offering quiet comfort. "Women have been doing this since the dawn of time, boss. Miss Amelia is tough. She will get through this." After 12 hours of labor, Amelia delivered a healthy baby boy. Dr. Bell brought the infant downstairs, wrapped in blankets, and placed him in Xavier's trembling arms. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is doing well, tired but well. You can see her in a few minutes." Xavier looked down at the tiny face, the closed eyes and miniature features, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. This was his son, his and Amelia's, a brand new life they had created together. When he was allowed upstairs, he found Amelia propped up in bed, pale and exhausted but smiling. He sat beside her carefully, placing the baby in her arms. "He is perfect," she whispered, tracing her scarred finger along the baby's soft cheek. "Xavier, we made something perfect." "We did," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at her son, Amelia said, "Thomas, after Tom, who has been such a good friend to both of us. Thomas Thornton." "Thomas Thornton," Xavier repeated. "I like it. Tom is going to cry when we tell him." Tom did indeed tear up when they announced the baby's name, gruffly clearing his throat and claiming it was just the dust. The men took turns holding little Thomas, each of them promising to teach him various skills when he got older. Jake swore he would make the boy the best roper in Colorado. Samuel promised to teach him tracking. Rory said he would give him his first riding lessons. Amelia recovered slowly from the birth, and Xavier took over much of the baby's nighttime care, bringing Thomas to her for feeding and then walking the floor with him until he settled back to sleep. Those quiet hours in the dark, his son against his chest, were some of the most precious of Xavier's life. As Thomas grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch thrived. Word spread about Xavier's fair treatment of his men and the quality of his cattle. He was able to expand his operation, hiring 2 more hands and increasing the herd significantly. Amelia had become known in Delta as well, for her kindness and her skill. She took in sewing and mending for other ranch families, charging fair prices and doing beautiful work. She no longer wore gloves except for warmth or rough work, having grown comfortable with her scars. When people asked about them, she told the truth simply. She had been hurt by a bad man, but she had survived and built a better life. Thomas was 2 years old when Amelia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1880, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Margaret, after Xavier's mother. "Our family is complete," Amelia said, holding Margaret while Thomas climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "If this is all we have, I am more blessed than I ever dreamed," Xavier agreed. "But if more children come, we will welcome them too." More children did come. Another boy 2 years later named James, and then twin girls 3 years after that, Emily and Elizabeth. The ranch house rang with children's laughter and the chaos of a large, happy family. Through it all, Xavier and Amelia's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, their hard times, seasons when money was tight or when illness struck the household. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. On their 10th anniversary, Xavier took Amelia on a rare trip away from the ranch, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and the older ones helping to supervise. They rode up into the mountains, to a high meadow full of wildflowers, and spent the night under the stars. "Do you remember when we first met?" Xavier asked, lying beside her with his arm around her shoulders. "I remember being terrified," Amelia said. "Terrified you would see through me, that you would reject me, that I would never be safe anywhere. And now I know what it means to be truly safe. Not because nothing bad can ever happen, but because I have you beside me and I am strong enough to face whatever comes." She turned to look at him in the starlight. "You gave me my life back, Xavier. You saw past the scars to the person underneath, and you loved me anyway." "Not anyway," he corrected. "I love you because of who you are, scars included. Every part of you, Amelia. Always." They made love there in the meadow, slower and sweeter than in their younger days, comfortable with each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, Amelia dozed against his chest while Xavier watched the stars wheel overhead and counted his blessings. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Margaret was wild and fearless, already declaring she would be a bronc rider when she grew up. James was quiet and artistic, always drawing the world around him. The twins were still young but showed signs of having their mother's quick mind and their father's stubbornness. Tom retired from active ranch work, though he stayed on in a small cabin Xavier built for him near the main house. The old cowboy spent his days teaching the Thornton children everything he knew about horses and cattle and the land. Jake eventually married a widow from town and moved to his own small spread nearby. Samuel and Rory stayed on, both rising to foreman positions as the ranch grew. On a cool autumn evening in 1890, Xavier and Amelia sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. Thomas, now 12, was in the barn doing evening chores. Margaret was helping Mrs. Chen in the kitchen. James was upstairs drawing. The twins were playing some elaborate game involving dolls and stick horses. "It goes by so fast," Amelia said. "I remember when it was just you and me in this house, and now it is full of life and noise." "Do you miss the quiet?" Xavier asked, though he was smiling. "Not for a second." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her. At 40, she still took his breath away, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with laugh lines and sun exposure. Those scars on her hands had faded over the years, though they would never completely disappear. She wore them openly now, badges of survival and strength. "I was thinking," Xavier said, "maybe it is time to teach Thomas more about the business side of ranching. He is old enough to start understanding the bookkeeping, the planning." "He would like that," Amelia agreed. "He wants to follow in your footsteps." "Our footsteps," Xavier corrected. "This ranch is as much yours as mine, Amelia. Everything we built together." She smiled at him, that smile he had fallen in love with 14 years ago. "Together," she agreed, "always together." As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the sounds of their children drifted out from the house. Someone was laughing. Someone else was singing. Mrs. Chen was calling that supper would be ready soon. Xavier looked at Amelia and she looked back at him, and in that moment, everything they had survived, every scar and struggle and moment of fear, was worth it for this. A home full of love, children who knew they were cherished, and a future stretching out before them bright with promise. "I love you," he said, as he did every day. "I love you too," she replied, as she always would. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above the ranch in Delta, Colorado, Xavier Thornton and his wife Amelia sat together in perfect contentment, their scarred hands intertwined, grateful beyond measure for the life they had built from the ashes of their pasts. The children grew and thrived under their parents' loving care. Thomas became Xavier's right hand on the ranch, learning not just the physical labor but the business acumen needed to run a successful operation. By the time he was 18, he could negotiate cattle prices with the shrewdness of a man twice his age, and his honest dealings earned him respect throughout the region. Margaret, true to her wild spirit, shocked the county by becoming an accomplished horsewoman. She could ride anything with 4 legs and taught herself to rope with a skill that rivaled the best hands on the ranch. At 16, she competed in her first rodeo, despite Xavier's initial protests, and took second place in barrel racing. Amelia had been her champion in that fight, reminding Xavier that their daughter had the same right to chase her dreams as their sons. James discovered a talent for veterinary medicine, learning from Dr. Bell, who still practiced in Delta. He spent his teenage years apprenticing with her, developing a gentle touch and intuitive understanding of animal ailments that made him invaluable to the ranch and neighboring spreads. The twins, Emily and Elizabeth were inseparable and clever beyond their years. They devoured books, teaching themselves advanced mathematics and science, and declared at age 10 that they intended to attend college in Denver when they were old enough. Amelia, who had never had such opportunities herself, worked extra hours with her sewing to save money for their education. In 1895, when Xavier was 49 and Amelia 43, they received a letter that brought the past crashing back. It was from a lawyer in Philadelphia, informing them that Charles Garrison had died, and that, in settling his estate, documents had come to light regarding Edward Garrison's treatment of his wife. The letter explained that several doctors had left sealed testimonies with their own lawyers to be opened upon Charles's death, detailing their suspicions about Edward's abuse. There were also bank records showing that Edward had indeed squandered the family fortune, exactly as Amelia had claimed. The lawyer wrote that if Amelia wished to pursue any legal remedy or public vindication, they would assist her. Amelia read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the stove. "You do not want vindication?" Xavier asked, watching her. "I already have it," she said. "I have this life, this family, this home. Edward Garrison and his brother are both dead, and I am alive and happy. That is vindication enough." But that night, Xavier woke to find her side of the bed empty. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, staring at nothing. "I thought I would feel something," she said when he sat beside her. "Relief, maybe, or satisfaction that the truth is finally acknowledged. But I just feel tired, Xavier. Tired of carrying even this small piece of that past." "Then let it go," he said gently. "You do not owe Edward Garrison or his memory anything, not even your anger." "I want to take the children back east," Amelia said suddenly. "Not to Philadelphia, but to New York or Boston. I want them to see the ocean, to visit museums and theaters, to experience a world beyond Colorado. I want them to know that there is beauty everywhere, not just here, and that they can choose where they belong." Xavier considered this. The ranch could spare him for a few months with Thomas and the foreman capable of managing things. And he had to admit, the idea of showing his children the wider world appealed to him. "All right," he said. "When spring work is done, we will take the whole family on a grand adventure." That summer, the Thornton family embarked on the journey of a lifetime. They took the train east. The children pressed against the windows in wonder as the landscape changed from mountains to plains to forests. They spent 2 weeks in New York City, where they saw the Statue of Liberty and visited museums and attended their first theater production. In Boston, they walked the Freedom Trail and ate lobster and explored bookstores that filled James and the twins with delight. Margaret was less impressed with city life, declaring that she missed the horses and open spaces, but even she enjoyed the harbor and the ships. Throughout the journey, Xavier watched Amelia blossom. She was in her element in the cities, remembering her youth before Edward, reclaiming parts of herself she had lost. She took the girls to art galleries and the boys to historical sites, and at night, she would sit with Xavier in their hotel rooms and talk about all they had seen. "I am glad we came," she said one evening in Philadelphia, where they had stopped briefly on their way back west. They stood at the window of their hotel, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was the house where she had suffered, but she felt no pull to revisit it, no need to confront those ghosts. "I am glad too," Xavier said. "The children will remember this always, and so will I." She turned to him, taking his hands. "Thank you for building a life with me where trips like this are possible. Thank you for giving me children who are brave enough to see the world and confident enough to know they belong in it." When they returned to Delta in late August, the ranch felt like a homecoming. The children scattered to their favorite places, Thomas riding out to check on the cattle, Margaret heading straight for the barn, James seeking out the dogs and cats. The twins ran to their room and their books, already planning to write about their adventures. That night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Xavier and Amelia lay in their bed and talked about the future. Thomas was 20 now, ready to take on more responsibility. Margaret at 17 was still young but would need her own path soon. The other children were growing so fast it made Amelia's heart ache. "I want to expand the house," Xavier said. "Add a wing for Thomas, so when he marries someday, he and his wife can have their own space while still being part of the ranch. James, too, eventually, if he wants it. Build something that can hold generations of Thorntons." "I would like that," Amelia said. "I want our grandchildren to grow up here, to run through these halls like our children have. I want this to be a home for our family for 100 years." They began construction the following spring, adding a substantial wing to the house with 2 separate living spaces, each with a bedroom, sitting room, and private entrance. The main house remained the heart of the home, with the kitchen and dining room and library that Amelia had slowly filled with books over the years. In 1897, Thomas married a rancher's daughter from Montrose, a sensible young woman named Catherine who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They moved into one of the new wings, and within a year, Amelia and Xavier welcomed their first grandchild, a boy named William. Amelia took to grandmotherhood with fierce joy, marveling that she had survived to see this day, to hold her son's child and pass on the love and security she had worked so hard to build. Margaret married 2 years later to a cowboy from Wyoming who could actually keep up with her riding. They settled on a ranch near Cheyenne, and though Amelia missed her wildfire daughter, she was proud of the independent, fearless woman Margaret had become. James opened a veterinary practice in Delta, becoming the region's only trained animal doctor. He married Dr. Bell's granddaughter, a woman who shared his gentle nature and his love of learning. They lived in town but visited the ranch often, James treating the Thornton livestock with special care. The twins both attended college in Denver, as they had planned. Emily studied mathematics, and Elizabeth studied chemistry, both of them brilliant and determined. They graduated with honors in 1903, 2 of only a handful of women in their programs, and returned to Colorado to teach at a new women's college being established in Colorado Springs. Through it all, through weddings and births and the ordinary struggles of life, Xavier and Amelia remained the steady center of their growing family. They had grown old together, Xavier's dark hair going gray and then white, his body still strong but moving a bit slower. Amelia's hands ached sometimes with arthritis that had settled into the old injuries, but she still sewed and cooked and gardened, refusing to let pain slow her down too much. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1901, Xavier organized a surprise party at the ranch. All their children came home, bringing spouses and grandchildren. Tom, now ancient and frail but still sharp-witted, told stories of the early days. Old friends from Delta attended, the sheriff and his wife, Mrs. Chen and Rory Doctor Bell, though she was retired now, and dozens of others whose lives had been touched by the Thorntons over the years. When Xavier stood to make a toast, his voice was thick with emotion. 25 years ago, I hired a woman who wore gloves always. I thought I was getting a housekeeper. Instead, I got a partner, a best friend, the love of my life and the mother of my children. Amelia, you took a half-built ranch and a lonely cowboy and turned them into a home and a family. Everything good in my life flows from you. Here is to 25 more years and then 25 after that. Amelia wiped tears from her eyes as everyone raised their glasses. When she stood to respond, she looked around at the gathered crowd, at her children and grandchildren, at the friends who had become family. "When I came to Delta," she said, "I was running from a terrible past, convinced that I was broken beyond repair. Xavier saw something in me that I could not see in myself. He saw strength and value and possibility. He loved me not despite my scars, but as a whole person, deserving of respect and care. He gave me the safety to heal and the love to flourish. This ranch, this family, this beautiful life, we built it together from nothing but hope and hard work and faith in each other. I am grateful every single day for the courage it took to answer that advertisement, to take a chance on a new beginning. Thank you all for being part of our story." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and more food than any gathering needed. Young William, now 3 years old, fell asleep in his grandmother's arms, and Amelia sat in her rocking chair on the porch, holding him close and watching the festivities through the window. Xavier found her there and sat beside her. "Are you all right?" "I am perfect," she said. "I am just taking a moment to appreciate how far we have come. Do you remember our first Christmas here, just the two of us and the men, before we were even married? I gave you gloves," Xavier said, smiling at the memory. "You gave me freedom," Amelia corrected. "The freedom to choose whether to hide or to show myself. That gift meant more than you ever knew." "I think I knew," he said, taking her free hand in his. The scars were still there, faded and blended with new wrinkles and age spots, but still visible. He traced them gently, as he had done 1,000 times over the years. "These hands have built so much, Amelia. They have created beauty and comfort and love. I am honored to hold them." She leaned over and kissed him, careful not to wake the sleeping child. "I love you, Xavier Thornton." Then, now, always. The years continued their march. The ranch prospered under Thomas's management, with Xavier gradually stepping back to an advisory role. More grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and chaos and unbounded joy. The twins both married, Emily to a professor and Elizabeth to a chemist she met at college, and they had children who inherited their mother's sharp minds. In 1910, when Xavier was 64 and Amelia 58, they took their first real retirement. They handed over the ranch operations entirely to Thomas, though they still lived in the main house, and they spent their days doing exactly as they pleased. Xavier read extensively, working his way through the library Amelia had built. Amelia quilted and sewed, creating heirlooms for each of her grandchildren. They took long walks together, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1912, at the age of 76. His funeral drew people from across the state, all of them with stories about how the old cowboy had helped them, or taught them, or simply made their lives better. Xavier delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about the man who had been his first employee and his lifelong friend. Amelia sat in the front row and thought about how Tom had been there from the very beginning, had seen her arrive in her gloves and her fear, and had never judged her, only accepted her. She would miss him terribly. The world changed around them. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, and Delta got electricity, and news came of war in Europe. But the ranch remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved even as the modern age crept in. In 1915, Xavier suffered a heart attack while mending fence with Thomas. He survived, but it weakened him, and the doctor ordered him to rest and avoid heavy labor. Amelia fussed over him relentlessly, monitoring his diet and insisting he take his afternoon naps, and Xavier grumbled but secretly loved her attentiveness. "You are not allowed to leave me," Amelia told him one night as they prepared for bed. "We have plans, Xavier. We are going to see our great-grandchildren. We are going to celebrate our 50th anniversary. You do not get to break those promises." "I will do my best," he said, pulling her close. "But Amelia, if something happens, I need you to know that my life has been everything I could have hoped for and more. You gave me that. We gave each other that," she corrected. "And nothing is going to happen because I forbid it." Xavier recovered slowly, and while he was never quite as strong as before, he managed well enough. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1916 with another large gathering, this time with great-grandchildren running underfoot, and the house so full it seemed the walls might burst. Margaret came from Wyoming with her family. James brought his brood from town. The twins arrived from Colorado Springs with their academic husbands and brilliant children. And Thomas's family, who lived right there on the ranch, orchestrated the whole event. Catherine, Thomas's wife, had become like a daughter to Amelia over the years. She ran the household now, freeing Amelia to enjoy her later years without the burden of constant work. But for this anniversary, Amelia insisted on helping cook, and together the women produced a feast worthy of the occasion. When Xavier stood to speak this time, he kept it short. 40 years with the most remarkable woman I have ever known. That is all I need to say. That tells you everything about how blessed my life has been." Amelia simply smiled and raised her glass to him, her scarred hand steady and sure. They had their 50th anniversary in 1926, both of them now in their 70s, moving slower but still sharp in mind and spirit. The party was smaller this time, with Tom long gone and Dr. Bell passed on, with some of the old friends from Delta no longer living. But all 5 of their children were there, and the grandchildren, and a new generation of great-grandchildren who would never know a world without automobiles or radios or all the other modern marvels. Xavier was frail now, his heart condition having worsened over the years. Amelia, too, had slowed, her arthritis making movement painful some days. But they still sat on the porch every evening, weather permitting, holding hands and watching the sunset over land they had worked and loved for 5 decades. 50 years, Amelia said on the evening of their anniversary after the guests had gone home and the house had quieted. "It does not seem possible." "Best 50 years of my life," Xavier said. "The only 50 years that mattered." "You have any regrets?" she asked. He thought about it seriously. "I wish I could have spared you the pain Edward caused. I wish I could have been there to protect you from the beginning. But no, Amelia, I do not regret a single day since you stepped off that wagon in Delta. Every moment with you has been a gift." "Even when we fight," she teased gently. "Especially then, because it means we both care enough to argue." He squeezed her hand. "You made a scared young cowboy into a man, Amelia. You gave me purpose and love and a family beyond my wildest dreams. I hope you know how much you are loved." "I know," she said softly. "I have always known, from the moment you kissed my scarred hands and called them beautiful. You saw me, Xavier, really saw me when I had forgotten how to see myself. You saved my life." "We saved each other," he said. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, and somewhere in the house, one of the great-grandchildren was crying and then being soothed. Life continued, generation after generation, all of it rooted in the love these 2 people had built from ashes and hope. Xavier passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later in the spring of 1928. He was 82 years old, and he died in his own bed with Amelia beside him, exactly as he would have wanted. His last words to her had been, "See you in the morning, my love." The same thing he had said every night for 52 years. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from across Colorado and beyond to pay their respects. Xavier Thornton had been a good man, a fair rancher, a devoted husband and father, and a pillar of the Delta community. The stories shared at his wake painted a picture of a life well lived, fully and with integrity. Amelia sat through it all with dry eyes, accepting condolences with grace. But that night, alone in their bed for the first time in half a century, she wept until she had no tears left. The hole Xavier's absence left was enormous, and she did not know how to fill it. Thomas and Catherine moved into the main house to care for her, though Amelia insisted she was fine. The truth was, she was not fine. She was adrift without Xavier, missing him with an intensity that physically hurt. But as weeks turned to months, Amelia found her footing again. She had her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. She had the ranch, which still operated successfully under Thomas's management. She had her sewing and her garden, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. She began writing her memoirs, wanting to leave a record for future generations about where the family came from. She wrote about Philadelphia and Edward's cruelty, not dwelling on the horror but acknowledging it. She wrote about her journey west, her fear and desperate hope. She wrote about seeing Xavier for the first time, about the kindness of the ranch hands, about learning to trust again. She wrote about falling in love, about their wedding, about each of their children and the joy and terror of motherhood. She wrote about building the ranch, surviving hard winters and dry summers, about the community they created. She wrote about Xavier's goodness, his strength tempered with gentleness, his unwavering love that had been the foundation of her healing. The memoir grew to hundreds of pages, a testament to a remarkable life built from trauma. Amelia had copies made for each of her children, wanting them to understand the journey that had led to their existence. "I want you to know," she wrote in the final chapter, "that love can heal even the deepest wounds. That it is never too late to start over, to find happiness, to build something beautiful from ruins. Your father gave me that chance, and I will be grateful for it until my last breath. I hope each of you finds a love like ours, a partnership built on respect and trust and genuine affection. That is the greatest gift I can wish for you." Amelia lived another 6 years after Xavier's death, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1934 at the age of 82. She was buried beside Xavier on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large cottonwood tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The ranch stayed in the Thornton family, passed down through generations, each adding their own chapter to the story. The house was preserved and expanded, the original logs from 1871 protected and honored. The brand stayed the same, a simple T burned into the wood and the flesh of cattle, marking them as part of the legacy. And on summer evenings, when the light slanted gold across the meadows and the mountains stood purple against the sky, you could almost see them there, a cowboy and his wife, sitting on the porch hand in hand, their love a palpable thing that had soaked into the very bones of the land and would endure as long as the ranch stood. The memoirs Amelia left became treasured family documents, read by each new generation. They learned about their ancestor who had survived unimaginable cruelty, who had found the courage to run and the wisdom to stop running when she found a safe place to land. They learned about Xavier, who had seen past scars to the person beneath and had loved without reservation or condition. Thomas kept his mother's gloves, the burgundy ones Xavier had given her on their first Christmas. They were displayed in a glass case in the library, along with Xavier's first rope and the deed to the ranch and other family treasures. Visitors would ask about the gloves, and Thomas would tell them the story, how his mother had worn gloves to hide the evidence of abuse, how his father had understood everything when he finally saw her hands, and how that understanding had led to a love story that spanned 5 decades and created a legacy that would endure. "Love heals," Thomas would say, repeating his mother's words. That is the lesson of Xavier and Amelia Thornton. Love heals, and it endures, and it builds something lasting. And in the end, that was their story. Not a tale of victimhood or tragedy, though it contained both those elements, but a story of hope and healing and the transformative power of genuine love. A cowboy had hired a woman who wore gloves always, and when he saw her hands, he understood everything. He understood pain and survival and courage, and he had loved her anyway, loved her fiercely and completely, and together they had built something that would outlast them both. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch today, raising cattle on the same land, sleeping in rooms built by their ancestors, living under the legacy of love that Xavier and Amelia created in Delta, Colorado, in the Wild West of 1876. The world has changed beyond recognition from those early days, but some things remain constant. Love endures. Family endures. And somewhere, in the whisper of wind through cottonwood leaves and the golden light of sunset over the Rockies, Xavier and Amelia Thornton watch over the legacy they built together. Their scarred and calloused hands still intertwined, their love as strong in death as it ever was in life.